You ever put a shot of vodka in there?
No, but I bet it would be good. I mean, it would probably, like a screwdriver, essentially, like a sad screwdriver. Yeah, orange Metamucil and vodka. Assdriver. Welcome to Backtracking, the show where two old friends take a second listen to influential bands' catalogs, track by track. I am J. William Hall.
And I'm Dan Fiden. We'll be taking this journey together, providing context both historical and personal on some legendary bands. Our second season, this one is all about pioneering indie rockers, American Music Club. J. William Hall, we are back for side 2 of West. Side 2, side B, the flip side.
The backside.
The backside. I've heard that you're a backside man. Is that true?
Where did you hear this?
Listen, I heard it it was on the internet.
I insist that you tell me. Where?
No, listen, it was on the internet. I don't want to reveal my sources, but
well, there is a large amount of Russian misinformation out there on the internet these days. I'm not, I have no way of knowing where these rumors about my backside have sprang from, but, you
think that it's
put two and
Russian,
two together. Of course.
It's a Russian campaign. And what is it that they're trying to, what's their ultimate goal by spreading this misinformation about you being kind of a backside guy?
Well, it causes a lot of distraction in the media. Yeah. Because just like we're talking about it right now, imagine this times 1,000, times 10,000, all over the country, internationally now.
Yeah. So you're trying to tell me that the Russian polity wants to prevent us from completing the AMC Mark Eitzel season of Backtracking? Is that what this is about? They're trying to subvert our efforts?
Yeah. It's in their best interest because, the name of the band, American Music Club, this podcast increases in popularity week by week, as the gospel of Mark Eitzel and the American Music Club spreads again nationally, internationally.
Yeah.
It I think sort of creates all kinds of fans of America through the transitive property.
Well, totally unrelated news. Thank you as a result of a very generous sponsorship that we've received. I am going to take this moment to announce that season 3 of Backtracking, we're going to be covering the band Gorky Park. That's right, Gorky Park. You remember Gorky Park, the 1980s Soviet hair metal band. You don't remember that?
Yes, now I do.
Yeah.
The name rang a bell, but okay. Gorky,
we're going to be backtracking Gorky Park. It's going to be amazing, and I'm going to be doing it. My co-host is going to be Nikolai Volkov, the WWF wrestler that you may remember from the 80s, frequently tag team partner with the Iron Sheik, Nikolai Volkov. Well, I'm sure you remember him for going out into the squared circle and singing the Russian Soviet national anthem in front of well, listen, I think he's a patriot, and that's why he and I are covering Gorky Park next season. Tune in for it.
Well, I wish you luck.
How many other podcasts can you tune into that mention the band Gorky Park and the wrestler Nikolai Volkov within the first 5 minutes of the episode?
I bet there's at least one out there.
You think so?
It could be a Russian podcast.
It's probably Russian propaganda. It's AI
generated Russian propaganda podcast. All they do is talk about anything remotely related to Russia or the Soviet Union. They just one after the other words.
Yeah. Who was that comedian that was around in the 80s? Who was
Yakov Smirnoff.
Yes, that's right. Yakov Smirnoff.
Yeah.
It's really funny to like think about now, whatever, 40 years on, 50 years on from all of that, like how strange like Russianness was in the US during the Cold War. I mean, it was so unusual, and yeah, I don't know. It's like, you had all of these really hilarious, very kind of broad caricatures of like, Soviets, like the guy, the Ivan Drago and Rocky, what was that, Rocky 3?
I think it was 4 was against Ivan Drago. I will break you.
I must break you.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah.
All right. So listen, enough about Russia. We are moving on to West. But before we do that, J. William Hall, I want to do a little tiny bit of housekeeping. I just want to acknowledge a very interesting, thoughtful email that we got from a listener named Sam. Hi, Sam. Thanks for reaching out. He basically was just opining a little bit on kind of shared two different things. One, he shared that he just recently saw Mark Eitzel live on this current tour that I think is, pretty close to being done. And he said that while at the gig, he introduced "Why Won't You Stay," telling the story that it was he was coming home from work and there was a woman that was like drunk or high and kind of dancing and just looking generally, disoriented. And he went up to her, asked her if she was okay, took her back to his house where she kind of crashes and sleeps on his couch for a day and a night. And that's what he claimed was the inspiration behind "Why Won't You Stay." Who knows whether, that's this email could be Russian misinformation as far as I know. But this is the story that Sam shared. And then he also just kind of opined on one of the things that we've talked about on this season. That is really the conundrum of AMC, right? It's difficult to articulate and to evangelize AMC to someone who hasn't heard them because it's just fundamentally super difficult to describe the band. It's kind of just tough to put your finger on.
Yeah. They don't fit in any one pigeonhole. That's why, we struggled with like how to introduce them in the intro to the show. Pioneering indie rock, like, you could say they're sort of Americana, but that's not like, it's just a touch, here and there. Sometimes, I don't know. So yeah, I agree. It is a quandary, and I think that that's probably, at least a portion of the reason why record companies, I'm sure, struggled with how to market them, like how to describe them in a press release,
Yeah, it is true. I would love to hear from listeners who think that they have a good, neat way to describe what AMC is in terms of like how to describe the music. If you had a friend who was, a person of taste, but who had not heard of AMC, how would you, listener, pitch them? Elevator pitch AMC, go, less than 50 words. If you have that and you think it's good, you send it in. And if we pick your description out, you're going to win. Not a thing. There will be no prize, but you're going to win in your mind and in our mind.
You get the dopamine hit of knowing, the satisfaction, the personal satisfaction of knowing that you nailed it.
Yeah, a real champion doesn't compete because they want the prize. A real champion's prize is winning. That's it.
Very, very wise. Very wise words.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I used to be an NBA coach. I used to coach the New York Knicks, and that's what I would tell my players on the New York Knicks.
Oh, really? That you coached the Knicks?
Yeah, just for 2 seasons.
How did it go?
93, 94. Oh, it was terrific. I mean, I had a great time. Is that what you're asking?
Was that just by virtue of being in New York during that time? Was it just an exciting time to be in New York, or did you enjoy the coaching aspect?
I mean, you know me. I love basketball.
I've heard it's your favorite sport.
When they take the shots and they go into the hoop, there's just something about that really.
Some shots are 3-point range.
Some are just 2. And you know what? There is even the possibility of a 1-point shot. That's called a foul ball, or what's that called? A foul shot.
I don't know why anyone would want to do it, because to only get one, like, you should do all 3-point shots all the time.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that was not my strategy when I coached the Knicks. All right, so why don't we just dig right into side B? I have to pull up my little track listing here because I can't quite remember what song.
One thing that I would like to say that, I sound like a broken record at this point, but I think we touched upon it last episode. The end of side A, it actually ends with one of the most like upbeat pop numbers in your life.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a curious thing to end side 1 on. I noticed just as I was, preparing for this week's episode, talking about side B, and I was Googling around and I found some clips of Eitzel and Buck and the rest of the band playing In Your Life on late night TV. And,
really?
Yeah. And I was excited because I noticed, I was like, the bass player, it's Justin Harwood. And so it was like, you know how Peter Buck and Scott McKahey and Barrett Martin they were in this other band at this time called Tuatara or Tuatara, or I don't know how it's pronounced. But they essentially became the backing band for Eitzel, I guess, for this whatever appearances that they were doing to promote this album. And it seemed like In Your Life was kind of like the big upbeat number that they were doing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. I think it's a very strange choice. In somewhat related YouTube-inspired updates here before we dig in, I happen to find myself going down a Mad Season YouTube rat hole last week. Mad Season, of course, the kind of grunge-era Seattle side project of
sort of a super group, a grunge super group.
A bit of a grunge super group, probably not as much of a super group as like Temple of the Dog, but
True.
Certainly there is some superness in this group. Lane Staley of Alice in Chains, Mike McCready, I believe, Barrett Martin on drums, and Skerrick, or not Skerrick, is it Skerrick? Skerrick, yeah, from this album also was in that band. I didn't realize that. And I noticed while I was watching this live performance video of them, I had thought would have been easily solved if I'd simply read the credits for this album before the last episode. I credited Barrett Martin with the vibraphone playing on this. I was wrong. Skerrick plays vibraphone, and he played vibraphone in Mad Season as well.
And he also plays sax.
So I think he's
basically like the band, so Mad Season and Tuatara clearly have like a Venn overlap.
Yeah.
And Mad Season and this band that Eitzel has assembled for this album are almost one and the same. Yeah. It's basically like minus Lane Staley plus Mark Eitzel.
That's right. And
interesting.
It is interesting. It's very interesting.
Now, so I'm not as familiar with the Mad Season album, but like musically, are there...
You know what? I would totally recommend you give that one a listen. Add that one to the check it out list.
I will add mad season. I'm doing it.
I
now.
think I think it's a pretty darn good album, but it is in a lot of ways similar to this album. It is surprisingly kind of jazzy and loungy, considering that it's, you think of it as kind of this.
It was supposed to be grunge.
Group. Yeah, and it definitely is not grunge. I don't know that there's a distorted guitar on the entire album. Yeah, it's an interesting one. It definitely has an interesting vibe, kind of a spooky vibe in some ways. But listen, the Vibraphone did great on that album, does great on this album. Thank you, Skerrick. Thank you, Barrett Martin. You two, you've made your mark. You've made your mark on my heart and my ears.
Well, let's talk about how they've made a mark on your ears on side B of this album.
Okay, yeah, let's get to it. All right, so side B, we're going to start it off with Lower East Side Tourist, 3 minutes and 50 seconds. Let's listen.
Lower East Side Tourist, out of your depth, seem to need alcohol.
Okay, J. William Hall, Lower East Side Tourist. These lyrics, my friend, feels to me like it's about someone drinking themselves to death. But maybe not. I don't know. I guess my impression of these lyrics is that it's like they're unmistakably Eitzel lyrics, right? It has a lot of the hallmarks of Eitzel's many other of his lyrics kind of across his career, but these just somehow feel much less polished. And I guess that's a bit of a through line for me on this album. It certainly was on side A. These lyrics feel, I don't want to say improvised, but they definitely feel to me much more like lyrics on The Restless Stranger than they do on any of the kind of intervening, is that the right word? Intervening albums.
Yeah, they feel a little more stream of conscious.
Yeah.
The one thing that a couple things that I noted. One is this is another in the category of tourist songs that seems to be like sort of a recurring theme for Eitzel, like either feeling like a tourist or like observing a tourist, Hula Maiden, Hello Amsterdam, Southend-on-Sea, Sacred Heart, where he's in Paris, and so he sings about that from different perspectives quite a bit. The other is that I was like, Lower East Side, I was like, is this about New York City? And then I was like, oh, maybe it's an area of San Francisco. And so I Googled it. And of course, there is this Lower East Side is like a specific part of San Francisco, formerly known as the Latin Quarter, with a significant Spanish-speaking population, particularly Puerto Rican, known for its creative energy and vibrant culture. And so that led me to think, so maybe he's just observing tourists who are kind of like drinking a lot and making fools of themselves, like wandering through the Lower East Side. Because the one line in particular, drinking on the company, that made me specifically think these are like businessmen, who are maybe down in the Lower East Side partying and, just kind of looking like fools. Drunken fools.
Interesting. Yeah, I am not familiar with the use of the Lower East Side for a San Francisco area. That's the first I've heard of it. But that's interesting. It's interesting what you've described.
This is just my theory springing from that particular thing.
Yeah, well, listen, I got it. What about, how do we feel about the music on this one? I kind of feel like the chorus in here is probably the strongest part of this tune. And it is conga-rific. Lots of congas in here. but just overall, it kind of leaves me a little flat, this one.
Yeah, I think it's a curious opener for side B because it does feel a little more it's more of a mood piece. Like, it has almost like, it sounds like maybe the acoustic guitar that I assume Peter Buck's playing is like tuned differently, so it has a very drony kind of like thing, and I feel like they're kind of doing like a mildly like Indian, with the tablas or whatever, percussion is being played. Like it sounds like this kind of drony, like, George Harrison, it sounds like kind of that sort of vibe. And and that Eitzel, kind of did a little freeform, sketched out some lyrics or whatever. That, that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, it really, it has very few musical similarities to The Restless Stranger, but the more I kind of like listen to this album, the more it reminds me most of The Restless Stranger. I can't quite kind of put my finger on why that is. I think, though, it's primarily that it feels much more improvisational. I don't know that The Restless Stranger was all that improvisational. Like, I don't necessarily get the sense that those songs were kind of like one take in the studio and that's what was on the album. I suspect that wasn't what happened. But I guess they just don't seem as carefully crafted musically, or like arranged, structured. I do think there is something to this notion that one of the things that the rest of the band in AMC kind of brought to Eitzel, especially in the early years, was they were able to kind of like, I don't want to say impose traditional song structure on his relatively unstructured initial writing, but it's something like that. You know what I mean? They kind of were able to intuit how to find a chorus in what maybe on the first listen doesn't naturally have one.
Yeah, they helped lasso it in and kind of arrange it.
Yeah, and this album feels a bit back to that, where they hadn't quite figured out how to do that yet. I feel the same way on this one.
Yeah, I think there was probably a basic, they got the basic structure of a song with just, Buck on guitar, kind of, we'll do this and then we'll go here, and Eitzel kind of came up with something, and then they sort of pulled the players in and were like, let's just kind of, improv a little over this and kind of come up with, having said that, like I was noticing listening to it earlier today that the recording is really good. Like the production is really clean and kind of like you can really hear everything really well, it's very professional, like,
it is.
And I think like sometimes on a few songs on this album, that's what I noted is like, everything is very competent sounding, and in some ways that like takes away from, you need a little bit of that quirkiness or weirdness or, something to it that sort of like hits your ear differently. And on a few of these, the songs sound a little bit like, I don't know, like Pat or something, like, cause it's like REM at this point had done so many albums and they were kind of in their imperial phase. And there was like a giant wake of bands behind them doing the similar or, same-ish kind of approach to things like, we're going to have the acoustic guitar and then we're going to have this electric lead, you know what I mean? And just, we're going to arrange it. Here's the verse and then chorus and then verse and chorus. And, and a few songs on this album feel a little bit more like that, like kind of like, simplest structure possible and, well recorded, well played. So not to criticize this song specifically, but I think like it's a different energy, than
it
AMC,
is. I don't want to say it's like there's a I don't. It's not. They're really like the just in the recording of the album overall. I actually really love the way. I think this album just sounds great. You know what I mean? I love the kind of warmth. I just love the production on the album. But I would agree. There's some. I don't know. There's something missing. It's not like. It's like a lot of it just feels a little gutless to me. Maybe is the way to describe it. Like there is no. In a way that I don't think 60 Watt. I think you can like make you can speculate about whether going in that direction I think was your favorite direction for Eitzel to go. One might speculate on that, right? I can certainly, the kind of Chet Bakery thing I totally get doesn't, appeal to everyone probably, but I don't think that album lacks any of that like gut in it. You know what I mean? I really do feel like the compositions mostly all have that. In this one, I feel like there's just some, I don't know, thing missing. And I honestly kind of blame Peter Buck. That's what I attribute it to. I just think his songwriting style is like substantially different, and it just, I don't know, it somehow isn't like
and without knowing exactly how they went about this, but my assumption is that for the most part, it was like Buck was like, here's a chord progression. What do you think? And Eitzel was like, yeah, I've got something I can sing over that. And that's how they built these songs. But of course that subtracts, one of the key features of Eitzel's, songwriting up to now is that he is writing the music as well. And we know he likes to do unusual tunings and stuff like in that Nick Drake kind of approach where he comes up with these unusual melodies and stuff because of that way of playing. And I think Peter Buck and I'm sure this is not 100% true 100% of the time, but like for the most part, like REM songs are usually like pretty simple chords, like super competently played and recorded, and but like when you're learning to play guitar, like usually you can learn to play REM songs like pretty quickly because it's a lot of strummy, we're doing a D and now a G and now an E and now an A, and repeat that, as opposed to like some of Eitzel's songs trying to figure out like what tuning is he in, and he's playing something weird up here and going here, and and that element is definitely missing, from this album. And so, I think some of the songs here are really good. And given how quickly they threw this together, like, that's impressive, but it's missing something from, previous Eitzel work. And that would be his, the underlying musicality, like of his chord progressions, so. But I will say that I assume we're ready to move on to the next song.
We are. Yes, we are ready. Do you want me to go ahead and announce it?
Yeah, announce it.
I'll do that. All right. So we are going to go into 3 inches of wall, 4 minutes, 48 seconds. Let's go.
Once I knew come when I was 3, saw the sun spill across my house.
J. William Hall. All right. You were in mid. The train was rolling. Let's get back on the J. William train.
I lost my train of thought. I don't remember. No, of course I remember what I was talking about. 3 inches of wall.
Okay.
First time I probably heard it was kind of like, second time I was like, oh, wow, this song gets pretty rowdy. And then third time I was like, this may be, it's one of my favorite songs on the album.
Wow.
And the reason is because on this song, like we were just sort of saying at the last one that, we're not piling on Peter Buck or whatever, but like, there's a lot of songs on this album where immediately you hear the guitar and you're like, it's Peter Buck. Like it sounds like REM, or it sounds like an REM B-side, that like Eitzel's trying to work with or whatever. And this one, you do not hear I mean, I'm sure Peter Buck's on it. I know he's on it, but like, it's not his sound. It's the sound of the rest of the band.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, I assume Barrett Martin on the jazz inspired drums, and then Skerrick, you know, like throwing down some wild saxophone, and
sax.
The band sounds alive on this one, to the point that it's like they almost like overshadow Eitzel. You know, like even though, you know, I think his performance on this is really good too, but like I was like noticing the band, like how, like, as the song goes on, it gets bigger and wilder. Yeah. And, you know, so I really like this one, just almost as a contrast to some of the strummy, samey, you know, REM-ish sounding stuff earlier on the album.
Yeah, this is definitely a remarkable song within the set of songs on this album. It definitely is extremely, I mean, in my notes, like, very jammy. It is a jammy song, you know. This feels like, it's like I don't want to say it's like a jam band song, but it's not far off from a jam band song. You know what I mean?
Well, it almost reminds me of like a free jazz, like John Zorn. Is that fair to categorize it?
Yeah. Well, Skerrick definitely has this kind of John Zorn streak through his playing, where he'll just like do these major freakouts in the same way that Zorn does.
Yeah. I guess that's why I was thinking that direction. But yeah, they're jamming hard.
They're totally jamming hard. This song inspired it. I listened to it a bunch of times, and there was something in my head I couldn't get out. I was like, fuck, this song for some reason reminds me of something. And it was Jesus Christ Superstar. I don't know why. Okay. I don't know why, but I was like, God, this reminds me of, like, you know, one of those freak out parts in Jesus Christ Superstar where, like, I don't know if you've like you familiar with Jesus Christ Superstar.
I'm familiar. Yes. It's been a while, but yes, I've seen it.
Yeah, there are a couple of these like musical moments in that musical where kind of the band does this like basically jam out kind of freak out thing, and I don't know why this reminded me of it, but it totally reminded me of it. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I have a note here that the beginning, you know, because first of all they're playing it in like 3/4 time. And then there's this like Hammond organ, you know, this kind of soul organ thing that comes in. And I was like, The Doors. It reminded me of The Doors, you know, which would have been like right in line with that Jesus Christ Superstar late 60s kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, I have to say, unlike you, I didn't like this song.
I can understand why some would find it a little, you know, hurtful to the ears at times.
Yeah, like I didn't really, you know, the sax stuff I found a little overbearing, frankly. Mm-hmm. I have not called out Mr. Eitzel or American Music Club on this across their catalog. I've said that they are better at this than the legendary Canadian power trio Rush. This song, however, has the worst kind of fade out. This is exactly the fade out that's like, we don't know how to end the song, so let's just push the faders down. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it does. It does. You can hear the jam start to break apart, you know, at the end as it's fading out. You know,
everyone's kind of looking at each other. They're like, what are we going to do?
Yeah. but they enjoyed, you know, up till that point, it was going so well that, you know, they were just like, you know, we'll just fade it. I get it.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's interesting. The last couple of albums, I feel like our tastes really diverge. The things that you tend to like on these, I tend to dislike, and vice versa. Strange, interesting to realize on Backtracking. It will be interesting to see if that trend continues as we go deeper still into the later era Eitzel solo work and the final two American Music Club albums.
This is true now. do you think, here's a theory that I'm positing.
Okay.
So this album was probably, up until this point, we were in each other's music sphere a lot.
Yeah.
And then right around the time of this album is when, we were sharing an apartment in Chicago and then split. And from that point forward, we have not shared each other's music space as much. So our tastes have diverged.
Yeah. You think they've diverged. I don't know. We haven't. I mean, honestly, I think the sad truth is I didn't after this. I mean, this is the thing about being old, right? Or getting older. I kind of stopped listening to new music in the early 2000s somewhere. You know what I mean? Certainly at the velocity that certainly not nowhere close to the velocity that I did kind of prior to that. It felt like in college, like every new band that came out, I kind of knew. Yeah, I had an opinion on like every album. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And
that just was not the case. Once you go a few years past 2003, 2000, somewhere in there, I just it was pretty rare that I'd find a new musician. So I don't know. Do you feel like I think you're doing better at that than I am. You're finding a lot more new stuff.
I may be doing slightly better, but I mean, I definitely had a period of time, which was basically like from 2000 to, I don't know, 2015, where I was not really hearing a lot of new music anymore, and didn't have a radio station that I would listen to. And so it was just kind of, I don't know. And, but then I started to kind of make a concerted effort, to get back into it. And so, that's been good, but there's definitely like a gap, between of 10 to 15 years where like I just have a smattering of things released during that time,
Yeah. Interesting. Well, all right. So we're going to keep our eye on how our tastes may diverge in the late catalog. But before that, we're going to have to move ourselves ahead, Jay William, to track 3 on side B, Move Myself Ahead. It is 4 minutes, 48 seconds. Why don't we just go ahead and listen? Okay, Jay William, you go ahead, start with the music or start with the lyrics. The choice is yours.
So my interpretation of these lyrics is that it is a commentary on on his place in the music industry at this time.
Okay.
I'm gonna move myself ahead, and I don't know how. He's got a low chord playing inside of him. There's a roller coaster metaphor going throughout. So I think this is sort of just a observation commentary on like the last few years of his music career. Thus, like a large part of his life, has been on this roller coaster going up and down. That was my interpretation.
Yeah, I did. It's interesting. Now, a couple of comments on that. Number one, I feel like you've found. You've interpreted a number of his lyrics over the course of the season so far as being about his experience in the music industry.
Yeah,
I think that's a theme that you've picked up on, which I think is interesting. I had a real tough time coming up with any single conclusion on these lyrics, but I will say that I really love that low chord, kind of repeated metaphor. I'm going to call it a metaphor because I don't really know how he's using it, but I like that idea. I like that. I just kind of thought of it as this like weird hum kind of in your body. You know what I mean? That like,
something inside of you that has to get out.
Yeah. This like, this strange, resonant thing in you. It in some ways, this is going to be a very long, it's a long walk, but I'm going to try and do it briskly. I don't know if anybody out there was a fan of the Art Bell radio show. Did you ever listen to Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell?
Yes. I'm familiar with Art Bell. Yes. Legend.
Yes. Art Bell, legend of broadcasting, host in the kind of, 90s, 80s and 90s, I think, of an overnight call-in radio show that was frequently about kind of conspiracies and stuff, UFOs and Bigfoot.
Yeah, paranormal stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. But for a while, there was a thread on that show where they would talk about something called HAARP, HAARP, that there was this like conspiracy that the government was building these essentially transmitters that would transmit like ultra low frequency sound across the world, and it would cause earthquakes and stuff, and like they were using it to like control the weather, and it was a wild set of. But when I like was listening to this low chord metaphor, for some reason I was thinking of harp and how these people would kind of describe these low frequency sounds doing weird things to their mental state and whatnot. Anyway, that is a long walk, but that was the one part of these lyrics that I really latched onto. But J. William Hall. What about the music? I want to know what you think of this music.
So here is another one on this album that I would say it feels like REM. It sounds like REM. It sounds like this could have been on the Out of Time album. The lead Hammond organ, strummy guitar. It's got a vaguely 60s vibe. Again, I would say like it actually reminded me of something like Jefferson Airplane, like don't you want somebody to love?
Sure.
It's very competent, but therefore it sounds a little generic, I would say, just as like a kind of mid 90s alt roots rock, I don't know what other, bands slot into that, like the Wallflowers or Counting Crows maybe, like, it's akin to that kind of stuff.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. I found this, I was not a huge fan of this. I think that there are some tunes here on the backside of this album that just leave me wanting something. This is definitely one of them. I just felt like this is probably, similar to you. It felt a bit generic and, unremarkable to me. So not my favorite song.
There's one point in the song though that I really liked, which is towards the end, where I feel like his vocal. I think we talked about this on the last album. Like one of the things that made him such a dramatic singer, or continues to make him a dramatic singer, is when he has the songs where he's kind of down low, and then he goes up high. Like he like goes way up at some point, and at this song it's like right near the end, like they're repeating the chorus as an outro at this point, and he jumps up an octave. I'm gonna move myself, and I was like, there it is. It was like it caught my ear because the song felt relatively monotonous up until that point. I mean, they're playing hard and they're playing well, but it's just kind of like a steady wall of sound, and then that broke through at the end, and I was like, I wish, like, it's like if they could have, I'm sure they, like, we talked about this, they probably only had this tiny window in which to, like, okay, we got to just get these songs written, we got to get them recorded, like, boom, if we're doing it right now. But if they had another month, or 2 months to kind of further develop it, it's like maybe they could have worked in more of those dramatic moments, unexpected jumps, like kind of thing, that I think AMC was really good at kind of crafting,
Yeah, I think AMC as a band, one of the things that I think you're missing, and I would argue you miss it more on West than you do 60 Watt. That's my own personal opinion. But I think it is to some level missing on both. As a band, AMC, and I said this in a previous episode, I think that one of the things that they they developed a really interesting ability to do was to function as like an orchestra swelling behind Eitzel. So they really just followed his kind of emotional cues and would swell, like kind of rise and fall emotionally and in intensity in a way that was purely supportive of his vocal performance. Right. And I think on these albums, especially on West, that interplay doesn't exist. So it almost feels to me like Eitzel's trying to follow the band and the band is trying to follow Eitzel, and no one's kind of like leading, if that makes sense. And so it's like the band is very competent, very steady, very skilled, sounds really good, but they just kind of go. And I think in some ways Eitzel is best served, at least in my highly subjective opinion, by a band that is less, strictly speaking, I guess, traditional. Like the tempos vary, the intensity and volume varies pretty substantially, and it all kind of, rises and falls, right? I don't know. I think that maybe when I used the term gutless before, that was unfair because I was uncomfortable with it when I said it because I think it's not fully articulating what I mean. What I mean is something more like what I just said, but I don't know a word to describe that. Somehow or another, there's just the interplay is not quite right there. Does that make sense? Are you kind of following what I'm saying?
I entirely hear what you're saying, and I agree with you. It just feels undercooked. I think it is a little bit of it. It's like, they haven't had time to craft the song as a band. It's like,
and I think that probably you develop that like over years of playing together, you know what I mean? So it's not right. I would imagine, it would be really difficult to develop that level of kind of intuition about how best to kind of like play together. But it's just, at least in my mind, it's undeniable by the time you get to Everclear, somewhere probably earlier than that, but certainly by Everclear, they really have that. And it's just such a fundamental part of how that band works that, doing something over a week with musicians that Eitzel, didn't know very well. It's in some ways unsurprising that they didn't have that level of, chemistry.
Yeah, and I think that, what's sort of emerging as a theme in Eitzel's solo career is like, he and AMC split, and so he assembles a different group of musicians, for each. It's like he's trying on different bands a little bit, so the style, kind of the contours of what the sound is are determined by that particular group of musicians. So it's like I kind of I respect it. I think it's kind of cool to be like, I'm gonna do an album with this group of guys, and I'm gonna do an album with this group, and and see what happens. It's exploratory, and so I think naturally, like, some of those are gonna be, with particular listeners, I like this one better than that one or whatever.
Yeah.
On this album, I feel like they should have. Well, I'll tell you. At the end, I'll say I'll give my spiel.
All right. In summary, your spiel will close us out. So, in order for us to get to the spiel,
yes,
let's go over old photographs. This song, J. William Hall, is 5 minutes and 22 seconds long. We should listen.
Black and white convictions. I remember the way.
Okay, so I just want to read you. I personally, I think that these are some of my favorite lyrics on this album. I don't know. I don't have a real strong sense of exactly, like, kind of quote unquote what it's about, I guess. But there are certain little sections in here that I really like. I love the kind of stanza or verse or whatever in here that that goes sayonara, old Singapore, dancing women in bar rooms, probably not around anymore, tattoos of sinking ships, silver long bruised black, some old photographs, fixing history won't get it back. I don't know. I just somehow or another, that like section really kind of captures me. I don't really know what he's going for, but just the I don't know, the images in there I think are pretty cool.
Yeah, I had a hard time kind of pinpointing what this could be about. It seems like he's he's singing about something that happened in the past to somebody close, and he's sort of comparing himself with that person. Maybe it sounds like something traumatic happened to them, and but I can't tell if it's he's praising them or he's condemning them or exactly what's going on. The tone of the song feels very much, this is like an REM dirge, the opening track on Automatic for the People, Drive. Like this feels like that vibe. It's like this, very lonely acoustic picked, almost has a Springsteen, Nebraska kind of vibe to it. Because Eitzel's voice sort of can get into that Springsteenian sort of quality. But I like the components of the song. 5 minutes 23 seconds seems like a minute and a half too long.
Yeah, you'd like this to be 3 minutes. You want to shoot for 3 minutes for this
3
one.
minutes 3:30. You're in, you're out. It's a mood. It sounds really good, but it's a dirge, and not in a slowcore way.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you kind of like called out that you felt like it should be shorter. One of my notes on here is definitely feels to me like something that needs some editing. But again, I think a lot of the songs on this album feel, again, like a first draft.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I would have really, I'm not certain that I would have liked a second Buck Eitzel album, but I would like to have heard it. You know what I mean? Because I do feel like there are these moments of like real possibility there. But this is definitely just kind of hints at them. But yeah, I will say one other thing musically that I really like about this song. I love that guitar feedback section. And it just is like evocative to me of Voodie.
Yes, it has a Voodie-esque, squealing kind of like background guitar creating atmosphere.
Yeah.
They've got some nice keyboards, some piano, no drums on this one. Which is a few of the songs on this album, they go drumless and they have like the percussion kind of filling in, and I like the chorus. I like most of it, but I don't know.
Yeah. All right, well, why don't we move on then? We have, of course, Fresh Screwdriver. One of, I think, the most memorable songs on the album, my opinion. We can discuss that after we give it a listen, Jay William. It is 3 minutes and 59 seconds. Let's try it.
I forgot there was such a thing as good people left. Can't you just save my life? I got a fresh screwdriver right before closing time.
Okay, so the lyrics here feel to me somehow more concise and more edited, I guess, more honed than most of the lyrics on this record, which I love. I just think these lyrics, this feels a little bit more lyrically to me like a finished product. Now, I will say that it is Eitzlerian almost too much. It's almost too classically Eitzel barroom, right? I don't want to say it's like self-parody, but there are moments, I think, in his catalog where it's like, wow, this is so Eitzel, it's almost too Eitzel.
Right.
And this teeters on that. But I think overall, I think these are really well crafted and seem to me like they're kind of cared for lyrics.
Yeah, he's back in a familiar place. He's back at the bar.
Yep.
He's talking to people, engaging with different people in the bar. Yeah, it feels more a little. It's still a sort of sketched out story, but it feels a little more developed.
Yeah. But what about the music, Jay William? Tell me about your thoughts on it.
So I think at the end of the last song, I started to accidentally get into some of my notes on this song. So First of all, I see that, former Mad Season guitarist Mike McCready makes an appearance on this
McCready.
Song. I assume
Seattle guitar legend Mike McCready.
Yes, he's doing the distorted squealing, I assume, that comes in later. I think I started to say that was on the end, if just whatever. But it's got this also has a little bit of the coffee house, because of the lack of drums and the sort of like bongo, tabla, whatever percussion going on. But I like it. It's pleasing to the ear. It sounds good to me.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So there was never a single released for this song or for this album, but didn't we say that we were tipped off by a friend that Lower East Side Tourist was planned as a single and was ultimately never released? Or am I misremembering that? I think maybe I'm misremembering. Yeah, I'm misremembering that.
Was that from the last album? Yeah, there was a song on the last album.
South End on Sea. I'm misremembering it. South End on Sea was the planned single that never ended up being released.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I would say on this album, like there are a few, Buck Eitzel live appearances online, and Free From Harm and In Your Life were the two that I felt like that's what, because they were both upbeat, full band, poppy kind of whatever.
I guess I guess the reason I brought all that single stuff up in the context of Fresh Screwdriver, I feel like this song, if there were a single on this album, maybe a strange choice, but I think that this would be the single. I think this should be the single because I think that this in some ways delivers best on what an Eitzel fan might expect, but it's clearly Eitzel. There's enough of Eitzel in it that like it's recognizable as like Eitzel. It feels primarily Eitzel and secondarily Peter Buck, but it blends both of them, right? Whereas I think on some of these other songs that you've talked about, they feel much more like REM songs featuring a guest vocalist. And for them to show up on a Mark Eitzel record feels a bit weird, right? You know what I mean?
Yes.
It feels more like a Peter Buck record with Mark Eitzel singing on it rather than a Mark Eitzel record with...
that's partially why they should have put Peter Buck's name on the album.
I think they should have just named the album "Stop Bucking Up My Eitzel." Right? Am I right?
They could have called it like the "Stop Bucking Up My Mark Eitzel Solo Album."
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Or buck it up, bucking up.
It's like Buttercup.
I can imagine the album cover. They could have made it kind of look like those. That's what I call music covers. Remember those like compilation CDs that they'd make? Have the real kind of loud, covers.
Yeah.
They could have done it like that. And it was like bucking up the hits, Mark Eitzel Volume 2, or something. All right.
That would have been a better way to market it because it would have gotten more attention.
Yeah, it would have. You could have done the TV ads for it as well, like they used to do. That's what I call music. All right. Well, these ideas are only about 25 years late. Unfortunately, I'm sure Mr. Eitzel is regretful that he didn't speak to us first, but there it is. So, is there anything else you want to add about Fresh Screwdriver, or should we just go ahead and move on to the final cut?
Yeah, I think I'm ready for the final track.
All right,
Can I
let's
announce
do
it?
it.
Do I get to announce it?
You can announce it. Sure, of course, yeah. Are you
final
ready
track.
to announce it? I mean, listen, I don't know
find
if
out.
you've announced the song before. This is a big
Okay,
moment.
well, here we go.
for you.
Here we go. It's track 12.
Okay.
It's the final
right.
song of side B. It's called Live or Die. I'm kidding. It's called Live or Die. Come on now. I just wanted to pretend I didn't know how to do the announcing.
You forgot? Did you say how long it is?
Oh, it is 5 minutes and 15 seconds. It's an epic closer. Here we go.
No one cares. No one cares if I live or
Okay. I want you to start with the lyrics, J. William Hall.
These, if you had to compile your list of like the 5 bleakest, choruses in a Mark Eitzel song, this would have to be in the top 5. No one cares. No one cares if I live or die. Like, how much more bleak does it get?
Yeah.
And
bleak.
There's no light, in this, and so it's a very heavy message to end the album on.
It is among the bleakest Eitzel closers that I can think of. It is bleak. There's no question about it. I mean, no one cares if I live or die is a pretty rough way to go out. And in some ways very disconnected from the vibe of the rest of the album. Because not just the music. I actually think the lyrics of this album, for Eitzel, I think this is a generally pretty bright for Eitzel, right? I mean, this is not, this isn't living on a prayer.
Well, it helps that it has a little bit of that shiny, happy people energy, like injected into various songs on the album, and so I think that it feels lighter. But even on those more upbeat songs, there's if you read the lyrics, they're pretty grim. But I mean, this is kind of rock bottom grim.
This is. Now, on the other hand, though, I think musically, this is one of my favorite songs on the album. It is Eitzel. Interestingly, this is the only song that Eitzel is credited as playing guitar for. Right? And so I kind of, once I realized that was the case, the obvious question that I had is, God, I wonder if that's fundamentally why I like this song musically maybe better than most of the rest of the album.
I think that you've nailed it. It feels to me, listening to it, like the chords and the sort of like foundational like playing is Eitzel. And so I think that this was one of his ideas, and Buck, added stuff to it, but it was not led by Peter Buck. And so there is something about it that feels closer to earlier, Eitzel material.
Yeah, but I really do like actually what this band's instrumentation does around the Eitzel kind of lead, right? I love this vibes and bass. It is a little bit back to the smoky jazz vibe that I think you first get on at the top of this album on If You Have to Ask. That I do think those two songs feel more like a logical outgrowth of 60 Watt than any of the rest of the material on the album. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I agree. I have a similar note where it's like I would like to hear a whole album with that sort of vibe, that sort of like sound to it, where, I mean, I'm sure, Peter Buck contributes mightily on those songs as well, but he's not up out front, it's not like, here's my acoustic riff and basic chords and you're, it's like, it's more of a band feel. And the Skerrick character who, has another kind of extended saxophone, free jazz freak out on this song. But like, I think it really adds some good energy because it's like Eitzel can match that, as a vocalist in his own way. And so I think like, I would have liked to hear more of that kind of material on this album,
Yeah, I completely agree. I didn't love the kind of jamminess and the Skerrickness of 3 Inches of Wall, but I like it. I agree. I like it here, and I actually love the way this song deteriorates in the end. I like song. I don't think it's something that you can do all the time as a band or on an album. I think it would get old pretty quickly.
I've been in a lot of bands where I've been in bands where every song disintegrates as you get toward the end.
Yeah. It's better when it's done intentionally.
Right.
But I like that here. So I actually think that they end with a high point, one of the high points on this album, in this song. I like the way this album leaves you. I love that this was selected as the last track on the album. I think it would have been a shame if it was buried really anyway. And I don't think it would make sense to lead off the album with it. I think it's probably just a little too dark lyrically, but I think this is one of the high points.
Yeah, I agree. It's a strong closer.
It is a strong closer. Now,
even if it sort of mismatches a little bit of the rest of the album,
Totally agreed. So, J. William Hall, we are now completed with side B. You, however, stated earlier that you have a spiel that you want to share. And so I am going to yield my time to the gentleman from Ohio, J. William Hall.
So I don't have a fully formed thought here, but this is it's
always best to lead off with that.
I just want to be clear with our listeners. So, in previous albums, I've had J. William Hall's revised edition of this album where I change the track order or I take a couple songs off or whatever. I haven't done really a full thing like that here, but my general thought is at 12 songs, I feel like this would have been a better 10-song album. And I feel like it almost would have been better to split it into like 2 EPs or something, where like one of them was sort of the like, it sounds like REM with Eitzel singing lead. That's one EP. And then there is the jazz Skerrick forward, kind of more influenced thing where it's more of like the group kind of jamming, but doing these kind of dark jazz numbers. So that is my just general observation of this album. I feel like there are 2 different albums that are trying to kind of like coexist here, and it doesn't quite work as like a full album experience for me. But I again, like as with some of these other albums that I went into it expecting like, I don't know if this is going to be, but I found a lot of stuff on here that I really liked. And upon backtracking, I'm like, like I forgot about that, or I never really listened to this too hard. And now I'm like, that's cool. So even if it's not my favorite album, I say kudos to Mr. Eitzel, to Mr. Buck, and the rest of the band.
Yeah. I completely agree with you. I think that there are a couple of songs on here, we just talked about it, that feel to me like a much more logical outgrowth of what Eitzel did on 60 Watt. And if they had done, a set of songs like that, I think that would have made sense to call a Mark Eitzel album. I actually think this album probably suffered from too much hype. I think Eitzel probably suffered, honestly, in terms of like, I don't know that this is the case, but I suspect that the involvement of Peter Buck and the fact that he was on a major label at this time combined to result in a level of hype around this album that ultimately was probably hurt the album. It raised expectations too much. I think the Peter Buck led songs, it would have been better off if that was like a Tuatara EP and it just was like Tuatara featuring Mark Eitzel on vocals, and I think it probably would have it just wouldn't have had quite the amount of like focus on it, and I think it would have been easier to interpret for AMC fans or Eitzel fans as like a fun thing he was doing on the side. But the fact that they kind of combined all this stuff into a Mark Eitzel album brought with it a set of expectations. And then the fact that Peter Buck was involved heightened expectations, which were already pretty high for Mark Eitzel, who had like, Songwriter of the Year, blah, 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 all this stuff that had happened a few years before. I just think it all kind of combined to overhype an album that really does feel to me as more of like a fun little side project goof off thing that they decided to put out, Just I guess this just feels to me like it was overhyped, and didn't. It would have been impossible to live up to that hype, I think, but it definitely, in my mind, probably didn't. So,
yeah, I
Jay
would tend
William.
to agree. I think. Oh, yes.
Yeah, sorry. I was going to move on to best and worst. Worst, but you tell me. Do you want to do that? Are you ready?
I just wanted to say I liked your positive. It could have been like Tuatara featuring Mark Eitzel as the vocalist, like, because as far as I can tell, I mentioned I saw that one video and it was, I believe, the full Tuatara, because Justin Harwood, who was a former bassist for the Chills and then Luna, and then he was in Tuatara, like, that's who was backing him on these live shows, and it would have been cool to have a whole album of that. It felt like some of the songs on this album, especially, the drumless songs, were just kind of a, Peter and whoever was around, kind of like filling it out. And yeah, anyway.
With that, J. William Hall, it is time for the moment that every fan of Backtracking, every one of them, the Legion fans of Backtracking, this is their favorite part of the show. It is when you, J. William Hall, have to identify the worst song on Mark Eitzel's second studio solo album, West, featuring Peter Buck. Go ahead.
There are a few songs towards the end of side one that I feel like were not the strongest songs on this album. The one that I've chosen as my personal least favorite is Then It Really Happens.
Okay. All right. That is interesting. Do you want to defend that choice, or are you just going to drop the mic?
I lyrically it was quite unclear what he's talking about. Then what really happens is the question I posed. I couldn't figure it out. It feels kind of like one of those kind of Peter Buck strummy. It just underwhelmed in that way for me.
Yeah. Well, I am happy to report, J. William Hall, that you are correct. The worst song on this album is Then It Really Happens. It is somehow just a swing and a miss.
I knew it.
Yeah, great job. Let's see if you can continue your performance, your champion performance, when you name the best song on the album. It is time, J. William Hall, for you to see if you can go 2 for 2.
I am torn, as per usual, because there are two songs that I think are, for me, the most compelling on the album, but they're very different songs, different styles of song.
Yes.
And I realize that I have to choose one, and that is a hard cross to bear. But
it is.
I'm going to not wimp out and choose what some may see as the obvious choice of I was going, well, okay, I'm not going to choose Free of Harm, okay? Instead, I'm going to say the best, most compelling song on the album is the final song, Live or Die.
Interesting. Very interesting. I think that is a reasonable choice. However, it is an incorrect choice. You are going to go 1 for 1 on the day. It's a respectable performance. It is not a
I'll go 1 for 2. 1 for 2 is what you mean.
Oh, yes, you're right. 1 for 2. I'm sorry about that. No, the best song on this album is If You Have to Ask. I think that the opener in this one, it was correctly selected as the opener. It is, I think, the most fully formed song on this album. I think it does the best job of both being somewhat identifiable as a Mark Eitzel song. There is some continuity, as we've already discussed, from the last album, 60 Watt. And I just think it feels to me like the most complete song.
It's interesting because, who provided the string arrangement on that song?
Who did?
Bruce Caffin. So,
Caffin, he's the Mark Whisperer.
Yes. He does something to elevate the songs with his arrangements.
Yeah. He certainly does. He certainly does. Well,
and that's the only one I think that he's credited on this album. Yeah. So, I mean, that's, the rest of it was the Buck Tuatara crew, but this one also had Caffin. So I think it's a solid choice, Dan. I'm not going to quibble.
He sprinkles that Caffin fairy dust on it, and it really it always seems to make the difference. All right, Jay William, that is it. We are complete on West. I am happy to have backtracked that one. It was really interesting to re-experience it after so many years. But I will say that I am very excited to move on to the next album next week. We are going to be diving into, you guessed it, Caught in a Trap, and I Can't Back Out because I Love You Too Much, Baby. It is really the last album of Mr. Eitzel's that I listened to. And I believe this one you've not listened to at all.
That is exactly right. I don't think ever heard it, or maybe I heard a couple snatches here and there along the way, but so we are in uncharted waters as far as I am concerned.
Well, listen, we will navigate those waters together, J. William Hall. We will navigate them together, and it will be an exciting journey, a journey of discovery, and a podcasting experience unlike any other. So until then, you need to tell the many listeners what they should do in the time off.
While you're waiting for the next episode of Backtracking to drop, you can send us an electronic mail message. Backtrackingrocks, ROX, at gmail.com.
Yes.
Or
that's right.
If social media be your calling, then you can find us on Reddit, Backtracking Rocks, ROX, or the American Music Club subreddit, which
that's right.
You had a hostile takeover of.
Well, it was not hostile. There was no hostility. We rule that subreddit with an iron fist.
You used your quiet violence to take control of the subreddit. There is also what else are we on? The Instagram, right?
The Instagram. We are on the Instagram. You can just go to the @BacktrackingRocks, ROX, always ROX, never ROCKS.
The language is ever evolving. Get on board with using X instead of CKS wherever you
That's right. And, of course, Twitter. You can go on there, and we are on that one, too. That is the extent of our social media footprint.
We keep it lean and mean.
That's right. And we really don't do much on those social medias other than post the new episodes. But if you want to volunteer to be our social media manager / hype man or woman, please send us a message and do us a favor.
Unpaid internship.
Unpaid. It's good that
you get amazing experience for your resume.
That's right.
It's a great resume
That's
builder.
right. That it is a great resume builder. It is a terrific resume builder. So, college grads, if you're out there wondering what you should do with your time, obviously this is what you should be doing. So tune in next week when we take on side A of that album that I have just described to you. Jay William and I will be back then. Until then, Jay William.
Yes.
Have a safe and successful week, and we will talk to you soon.
That sounds delightful.
Bye-bye.
Ta-ta!